There's a meaning crisis. There's a meaning crisis. Everyone's searching for a meaning. Yeah, we know, okay? Now what? Hello, everyone. My name is Reese, and welcome back to the Cohere Collective. Today, we're going to dive into more specifics around the Cohere Collective. What is the Cohere Collective and what's the Coherence Matrix? This is the system that we offer as a way to explore, discuss, think about meaning and purpose and the big questions in life. If throughout this video you can hear some birds and outdoor noises in the background, you're welcome. It is a lovely Florentine evening. You can see it's like right at kind of in between golden hour and dusk, and I just wanted to hop on here and talk about the Coherence Matrix for a little bit. And I don't want to close my windows, so hopefully the sound only adds to your experience. So we're going to start with the 6 pillars of coherence, and I'm going to try and put some different graphics on the screen as we go throughout this video so you can kind of visually understand the things that I am talking about. The 6 pillars of coherence are the self that manifests as well-being, source that manifests as spirituality, the other that manifests as community, philosophy that manifests as values, space that manifests as justice, and purpose that manifests as creativity. Now, these 6 pillars are all connected, interrelated, overlap, all that good stuff. But I want to talk about the construction of these pillars. Of course, everything that we understand about life is filtered through our idea of self. We cannot experience what it is to be a human without being a human, right? There is no way to be aware of our awareness, conscious of our consciousness without being a human being. It is a trait unique to human beings, and that necessitates that there is a self through which we perceive everything else. So self is the foundation of all of these things. I can't break free of my brain, my mind, my soul, my DNA, these set of eyes. These are all of the things that are both my avenue into understanding and the very thing that blocks me from glimpsing fully beyond the veil. So this is the first pillar of coherence. It's where we begin, because it's where we begin. Now, this self has to come from somewhere, right? This is where we get the second pillar, source, that manifests as spirituality. Now, spirituality carries a lot of thoughts with it, but before we get to that, I want to talk about source. And when I say source, I truly mean every single dimension of source. All of the things that we're sourced from. Our DNA, our genetics, our parents, right? That is absolutely a source of me. This meat suit, this human identity, your name, your family, your ancestry, all of these things source you. Beyond that, we see different worldviews and different communities start to layer on different ideas around source, right? Religions, spiritualities, philosophies, worldviews. In all of these non-physical, non-material senses of self, they are all sourced from some sort of mystery, right? And the only mystery that we kind of all agree on, there are a few people that don't agree on this point, but for the sake of the video, consciousness, the grand mystery, the hard problem. We know that we are conscious, that I am aware that I am aware, and yet we don't really have anything to describe why that is the case, where it came from, or how it interacts with the fact that I am also a physical body. There's 2 kind of famous thought experiments here. One is Mary in the Red Room. Imagine a woman who was locked in a room without any color at all. It was completely black and white, no mirrors, she couldn't see herself. Everything is black and white. But she has access to every piece of information that is scientifically accurate to describing the color red, down to the minutia of the eyes and cones and pyramids and things in your eyes, and the experiential feeling of seeing a shiny red apple or a bright red rose. She knows all of these things. She has access to all of it, but it's still black and white. When she leaves the room and sees the color red for the first time, does she gain a new experience? Does she gain new information? Intuitively, it seems like yes. What is that? The second example of the famous thought experiment for consciousness, imagine a red triangle, right? You can see it in your mind's eye. There's a triangle there. It's bright red. Now, if I were to ask you, where is that red triangle? You would probably say something like my mind or my mind's eye, or it's in my head, right? But where is it? Because you're a physical person. You have a brain with neurons firing, and that's what is triggering this idea of red triangle. Where can I find that red triangle? There's something non-material about it, right? It's kind of existing in this ephemeral metaphysical state external to the self. I'm not going to cut open your brain and find a red triangle. So there's this non-physical thing. And it kind of seems like that has to come from somewhere. That at some point, even if consciousness did randomly arise in one of the first human beings through evolution, why would that have happened? What evolutionary benefit is there to being conscious, and why in that moment? Why is that non-physical awareness now suddenly able to interact with our physicality in this very specific way? Because there's nothing in the human being that existed right before the human being that was conscious that would be that majorly different about their physical body, their chemical makeup, their genetics, their DNA, their brain chemistry. It would be almost identical, except now there's this non-physical thing. It feels almost magical. So what's that? Well, that is this other side of source. That is moon. And I like to call that the mystery. Capital T, capital M, the mystery, because it's a mystery. The whole thing is the mystery. And that's the second pillar of coherence. Then when we're thinking about these two pillars, the self and source, there is this other really important facet of the human experience. And it is the other. The fact that there are other selves that aren't ourselves. And through that, we build community. We build relationships. We make memories. We create things. We live this life together. And that's really special. But it's also fundamental to this life. So this is where we get the initial triad of coherence: self, source, and the other. The three fundamental elements, truths of the human experience. I think of this initial triad as the distinctions of awareness, right? If you just had a random cloud that was just awareness, there's nothing really separating those awarenesses from each other. Even if it was like, oh, there's just awareness in general here, the cloud would probably just think that it's one giant cloud. But there's something that defines us as separate from the awarenesses of other human beings and from the awareness of source. Some of us would call that a higher power, some of us not. So that's why I call it source. In this lifetime, there is a strong distinction here. It feels like whatever source is kind of different than how I describe myself. And we also know for a fact that other people are living their lives in the way that I'm living my life. I say knowing for a fact, but actually, that's not true. In philosophy, we can't really prove that anything exists outside of us, and no one is experiencing this life in the exact way that we are. Very Truman Show, very The Matrix, but for the sake of what we can safely presume, these are three distinct, different experiences of life. Then we get into the secondary triad of coherence. This secondary triad looks at the intersection between all of the elements of the first triad, kind of like primary colors making up secondary colors. Between self and source is your purpose. It's your calling, the thing that you feel like you were put on this earth to do. What put you on this earth to do it? Source. And who is the thing that's doing it? You. The intersection between source and self. Between self and other, there are relationships, love, romance, intimacy, friendship, family, all of these beautiful, beautiful connections that make up the best parts of life. But what is the thing that connects us to those people? What is the thing that makes a romantic relationship distinct from a friendship, distinct from a familial relationship, distinct from the relationship to the self? Space. Of course, this pillar arises out of the idea that we are starting from the self. Again, we cannot understand or perceive anything if it is not from this inception point. So when you as a self are looking out on others, I think the thing that we are really called to see is the space that exists in between these different awarenesses. How much space are we allowed to take up? In this, I think the idea of the infinity is something that's really helpful. And I talked about this a bit in the Why is the Cohere Collective video, but I'll pose it to you briefly here as well. There is an infinite amount of numbers between 1 and 100. You have 1, 1.1, 1.11, 1.111, so on and so forth. You can go on forever. There is also an infinite amount of numbers between 1 and 2. 1, 1.1, 1.11. And that can go on forever. But it does seem like the infinity of numbers between 1 and 100 is bigger than the infinity of numbers between 1 and 2. Now, of course, that defies the very definition of infinity, what it is to be infinite. Yet, instinctively, it kind of makes sense. I like to think that we are all one set of infinity in and of ourselves. If I am 1 to 2 and you are 2 to 3, we are both little infinities, but infinities within the broader infinity of 1 to 100. And that 1 to 100 is what I would kind of label as source for the sake of this analogy, right? If one day I decide that I'm old too big for my britches and I'm going to be 1 to 2.2 instead of just 1 to 2, and that means that you have to be 2.3 to 3. Well, I'm taking up space that isn't mine to take up. I am letting my ego, my understanding of my infinity, get bigger than my rightful portion. And that is encroaching on your space in a really dangerous way. This is why the manifestation of space is justice. We can begin to notice the way that we're not special. Not that you're not special. We're all special. We're all infinities. But that our infinity isn't any more special than someone else's. They deserve to have every inch of space that we want to have too. Basic golden rule shit, right? And that's where this idea of justice comes from. Making sure that every single self, even when conceived of as an other, has the same space, the same room to live fully as a self. And that takes us to the intersection between source and other. Connections happen over shared interest, shared values, shared reasoning for moving forward. Not exactly the same as purpose, but a way of comporting yourself through the world. And doing that alongside other people makes it more painful sometimes, less painful sometimes, more meaningful almost all times. So this is where we see philosophy arise, our values. It is these values that allow us to connect and understand the other and respect the other as a distinct thing, separate from the self, but still important in and of its own right. And then when we get to share a value of love, connection, community, name any value here, that is the thing that binds us together, the way that we view the world. Now, when we layer these two things on top of each other, we see a hexagon arise. If you were to place straight lines over the edge of each of the triangle's points, the hexagon is a really sacred shape in sacred geometry. There is a whole host of research that I will link some of down in the description down below, so if you're interested in sacred geometry, you can dig more into it. I don't think it's necessary to understanding the Coherence Matrix. I think it just makes it magical, and it's part of why I really enjoy it and why it makes a lot of sense to me. But whatever you get out of this matrix, take what works and leave the rest, right? This hexagon is kind of the basis of the matrix to begin with. And I think keeping the lines of the triangle involved in it keep the connection and overlap between all of these things really strong in the mind's eye too. Source and self don't just intersect to create purpose. What happens when we consider purpose and source, or purpose and self? Something else kind of seems to arise out of that too. Even different than that, what about purpose and other? How do those two things combine to create a new energy? And then move that connection to the secondary triad too, purpose and space. What does that look like when those interact? These lines call to mind the way that any distinction is really arbitrary. It's just a shorthand, right? We use shorthands all the time to be able to talk about really big, complex things, but you can't sit here and build an entire YouTube video about all of the complexities of your belief system every time you want to have a conversation with someone. You have to just say, oh yeah, I'm spiritual but not religious, and move on. Even though clearly that's not really the entirety of my belief, I'm not going to ask someone to listen to this rant in order to understand the nuance that goes into that every single time someone asks me why I'm not a Christian. Same principle applies here. This format is an offered shorthand for these concepts. Yes, they overlap, they intersect, they are not all-encompassing of every single important thing, and also they are much too broad to be helpfully specific. So the matrix is a suggestion to try and find, again, a middling path between subjectivity and objectivity, a specific and a general, a singular and a wholeness that gives us a starting point to jump off of. When you have a blueprint, you're not saying this blueprint is perfect. It is done. No. The blueprint is there so that you can build a house. No one is going to frame a blueprint and say, what a beautiful house. We say, that's a great blueprint. Now go build the house. And then when you're ready, you let people come and visit the house and walk through and explore the different rooms and see the odd quirks that you built in. I was lucky enough to have a childhood home that was designed by my parents, and one of my favorite things to do was to show my friends when they came over to visit all of the fun things that my parents added. Look at the laundry chute. That means I can throw my dirty clothes upstairs in my closet all the way down to the laundry room down below. Look at the way this half circle in my parents' bedroom is the same half circle that's above the dining room that the circular table fits in perfectly. These are oddities, quirks of this house that the blueprint may or may not have outlined beforehand, but as you build it and you get to take people through it, that's when it comes to life. That's when these things actually matter. A blueprint means nothing if you're not building. And along the way, you're going to have to change certain things that you thought would work in the plan. Sure, it sounded really great to have a laundry chute that all 3 main bedrooms could connect to, but it actually didn't make a lot of sense when we started building, so we nixed the laundry chute for my brother's room, for example. I'm clearly not a carpenter or a builder or an architect, but I hope the analogy lands. As you're going, things will have to change and shift, and it doesn't mean that the blueprint was bad or wrong. It's built into the very idea of what a blueprint is, that it's not a finished project. So this is the basics of the Coherence Matrix. Bars, if you will. Write it down. Use it for your next rap. Or don't. I shouldn't be allowed to make videos. So, built into the Coherence Matrix, even though from just the outside looking in, on the outside I'm looking in, it looks as though it's strict and stable and sturdy. It's strong like hexagon, strong like bull. The Coherence Matrix seems fixed, right? This is how it is. Please do not think of it as such. Built into this matrix is an invitation for rebellion, for raging against the machine that it is, right? Any machine that asks you not to rage against it is flawed, in that it thinks it isn't. This is flawed, absolutely. But in owning those flaws and figuring out what those flaws mean to you specifically, hopefully you can build some muscle and sinew and skin around these bones to build up coherence that works for you. The other really cool thing about a blueprint is that you can look back on it. The first house I moved into after I graduated from college had a blueprint of it in one of the random closets upstairs. And I still have it somewhere. And it was this old piece of paper falling apart, and the house was built in like the 70s. It looked like an ancient pirate map, but it certainly wasn't. And it had the original floor plan of the house, and the house looked different from what this floor plan said it should be. But looking back on that floor plan, I learned so much about what the original constructors thought about this house. Same works here. Having a blueprint allows you to have a benchmark to measure your growth. Yeah, at one point I did think that self and source intersected in this really important way, and that's actually changed really significantly for me because of this added piece. And you can kind of see it built into the line that connects self to source. That's the beauty of something being evolutionary, in that it always evolves, is that it invites you to not throw the baby out with the bathwater, but to hold on to the bathwater in an old jar, gross, to look back on and remember why it was that you started there to begin with, and thank it with gratitude because you would not be where you are now without it. The other added piece of the Coherence Matrix is the manifestations. Now, as we went through all of the pillars, I tried to say the name of the pillar and then say, which manifests as blank. What does this mean? Well, manifestation has taken on a very specific meaning in spiritual New Agey communities, which have gotten very popular as of late, and therefore it's kind of widespread throughout all sorts of things in our culture. That's not the type of manifestation I mean here. The manifestation I mean is that this is how an abstract concept becomes real in this world. How does Pinocchio become a real boy? How does Source actually arrive in this reality? I'm tempted to say the 3D, but now we know there's somewhere around 12 dimensions, and Source is kind of up against a non-material understanding to begin with, but I hope you know what I mean in that these are very abstract, ephemeral concepts that still have very large, real roles to play in our lived life, in our lived reality. And that's where these manifestations come in. These concepts are really important for thinking about the way that we think about life. But it means fuck all if it doesn't actually change the way you live. It's great to think about the afterlife. It's great to think about existentialism and nihilism. It's great to think about ethics and morality and free will and the existence of God and any number of huge important questions. But if you are going to behave the exact same way, no matter what that answer is, why ask the question to begin with? It really doesn't matter. And that is actually the crux of the Coherence Matrix, is that it necessitates you invite what you think about these concepts into the way you live, day to day, every single day. That sounds like a lot of pressure. I don't mean it to be that. I mean it to be something that we can embody and pursue, as opposed to something that we can set and forget, right? We're not forgetting these things, but we're also not perfecting them because, again, they're evolving. So, back to pillar one, the self, it manifests as well-being. When you think of the self operating in the world, there are so many ways that we need to take care of the self. We need to eat well with foods that fuel our body, that fuel our brain, that take care of our nervous system and our gut health. Those are very vital to living well. We also need to move in ways that feel good for our bodies and listen to our bodies when they ask for different things. Is your body asking for rest? Is your body asking for challenge? Is your body asking for stretching and movement? Important to tune into this. Then there's also the added dimension of the mental and emotional self. How are we considering our mental health? How are we considering the way that we show up for ourselves? And of course, self-care has become such a hot button topic. And when I talk about self-care, I try and be very intentional about the fact that it's not just bubble baths and face masks. It's calling yourself on the carpet for the hard things. If you tell yourself you're going to start drinking 8 glasses of water a day, and that's a self-care thing that you're doing, the self-care actually isn't in the moments where you are drinking water and you drink your 8 glasses of water. The self-care is in the moments that you realize you've forgotten to drink water all day. What do you do then? Do you beat yourself up and shame yourself and say, I knew you'd do this, I can never count on you, you piece of shit, it's just a glass of water, it should be easy? That doesn't sound like taking care of yourself to me. Do you let yourself off the hook and you say, it's okay, it's just one day and we always say it and then we never do it and it's always fine and it'll be all okay? That doesn't really sound like taking care of yourself either. I think the self-care is probably somewhere in the middle of saying, okay, that's disappointing. This was a goal I set, and I let myself down, but that's okay. I forgive myself. Because I set this goal because I love myself to begin with, and tomorrow is a brand new day to try again. And goals are meant to be worked on and grown through, not checked off the very next day. If that was how goals and succeeding worked, what's the point? No one would need New Year's resolutions, or you would never have heard the term SMART goal, right? Again, it's in this middling way that we find truth arise. So these are the ways that our selfhood can manifest in this reality. Then we move to source. I say that this manifests as spirituality, and I think that this is one of the hardest ones to define because not only is it like the biggest question, but source, I think, as a term, has a more accessible entry point regardless of your worldview. Spirituality almost entails some sort of higher power, and that's really not what I mean by it. And so if you have a suggestion for a different word, maybe the mystery, maybe worldview would actually be a better term for it. But what I really mean when I say spirituality here is it's the way we connect to our source. You may be a deeply scientific person who does not believe in anything non-material and yet still finds wonder and awe at a beautiful sunset, at physics constants, at the ability of our DNA to work at all. My word, I gave myself goosebumps talking about it. Those things inspire the very same feeling in me that thinking about my higher power does. So would this scientist, skeptic, materialist consider themselves spiritual? Probably not. But based on my definition, I would like to think that it could be encompassing of that. Then we do have this flip side of religion, really strict religion, whereas spirituality can be a little bit more flimsy, not in a bad way, but in a way that is personalizable. Religion doesn't have that aspect. It's much more prescriptive. And I think that the term spirituality can also turn away people that are pretty religious and maybe even orthodox in their religion. And I don't mean to do that either. So, spirituality. All I mean by that is just your relationship to source, and whether or not that looks like going to church, reading tarot cards, finding awe in a sunset, in your favorite song, in your best friend's laugh. Those are all deeply spiritual things that arise every day. And so when we talk about the manifestation of source, it is tapping into that wonder, into that awe. Maybe awe is a good word for it as opposed to spirituality. But that thing. I do think that spirituality, like religion, invites in a certain level of construction in ritual and routine around a relationship to source that I do think is important. Even if you are a scientific, materialist person, having dedicated time throughout the day to pay attention to these places of awe are also important. There are plenty of people that I know that don't believe in a higher power that meditate daily, not just because of the mental health benefits, but because of how it makes them feel connected to their loved ones and reminds them of the reality that they live in and not to get too carried away with the small mundane tasks that they need to get done. Even those that are atheist and think there's nothing quote unquote bigger going on here still understand there is an eye towards the mystery, still understand that there is something, even if they say it's nothing, which maybe that's really dismissive of atheism, and I don't mean it to be. I hope that it does not come across in that way. I'm deeply trying to make space for the nuance in the ways that these different worldviews can show up. So even if you are someone who has this belief system that there is nothing more important or meaningful going on, this is all a cosmic fluke, and I'm just doing my best, I still think that you get a certain feeling when you hug your mom or when you have the first bite of a really great meal. And it's that feeling that we all feel that I think is the universal piece here. Third pillar of coherence, the manifestation is community. And this is a big one. We are tribal creatures. We exist in community. Humanity is the word for the human experience, and it is inherently collective. The Cohere Collective, right? The reason why this was founded as a collective is because my experience on its own means diddly squat. I don't care about my experience. Well, I care about my experience, but it doesn't really matter if I'm not doing anything with it. And how do we do things with these things? We share them. We connect. We grow together. This invites in more complexity and nuance into our lives. Human beings are made to be difficult. They were made to take up space. They're little mini infinity, and they were made to be annoying. And I say that as someone who is fully aware of how annoying I can be. But that doesn't make these things any less necessary to our experience. There is something we learn about the self in connecting with others and vice versa. Community is the thing that arises. It is the thing that provides support. When we lose track of the self, we can go back to community. Fourth pillar of coherence, philosophy. It manifests as our values. Philosophy as a concept is borderline unuseful anymore. I think that there is this way in which you hear the word philosophy and it's like, oh, old white man with a beard in an old Ivy League college lecture hall droning on and on about Plato and give me a break. And let's be clear, a lot of philosophy is like that. And that needs to change, because that's not what philosophy is supposed to be, in my opinion at least. Philosophy is a lived thing. And your values, the things that you hold true, near and dear, the things that you want to work on, that you want to espouse, that you want to hold, that you want your life to be emblematic of, are the ways that your philosophy is lived out. If you believe that there's no free will, how does that change the way that you treat other people? You might hear that and say, well, if you don't believe that there's free will, then wouldn't you just treat other people horribly? Wouldn't you just become a raging hedonist who does whatever they want whenever they want? Well, perhaps. Or there is the other side of not believing in free will that comes with prison reform and a look at our criminal justice system and the way that we treat other people. If something is out of your control, what does that mean for the way that we see someone's humanity? It asks for a lot more compassion, actually. So there's a flip side to everything, but one example for the way that your philosophy would actually fundamentally and importantly change your lived values. The fifth pillar of coherence, space, manifests as justice. Now, the way that we take up space, as I described it just a little bit ago, is inherently dependent on how far we encroach into someone else's space. And I think you can already see here where the threads of justice come into play. We all have a certain amount of space to take up. And it is our job to take up that space, no more, no less. When we see people believing that they deserve more space, that they, for some reason, are more entitled to more space than someone else, that's when problems start. And I'm laughing because I would cry if I didn't. Social justice has to be a part of this conversation. Environmental justice, economic justice, all of these things. That's why I just use the word justice, because there's so many different types of justice that are important. It is so great, so powerful to be considering these questions. But I want to underline what I said earlier about the manifestations truly being the crux of coherence. If they do not change the way we live, it does not matter. There are so many people whose space has been taken away from them for any number of reasons. And it is not okay. There are so many people who think that they are entitled to so much more space than anyone else. And it is not okay. And in taking up our space fully, we not only prevent someone else from taking that space from us, but also live through example what we believe to be right and just. Money does not give someone more space. Power is not tied to your space, and how much space you take up does not mean that you get to hold that space as power over anyone else. In fact, power over, a dangerous form of power, I think could probably be rooted back to this idea of taking space from someone else. This is your space that I have taken, therefore I can hold it over you. Dehumanization anywhere is a threat to humanity everywhere. This is a quote from Making Meaning, the flagship podcast of the Cohere Collective that a guest shared with me, Santana Ennis. I'll link the episode somewhere and in the video description for you to check it out if you're interested. We must dehumanize someone else to take that space away from them. Because inherently, when we take space from someone else, it means that we see them as less human than we are. We somehow are better and therefore more worthy and deserving of that space. And that is dehumanizing. Because we already talked about how inherent to the human being is that space that you have been given to take up, or that you have created to take up, dependent on your worldview, your spirituality. I'm also really frustrated with the amount of content that is out there about these big questions that don't talk about the way that it changes our day-to-day actions, the little things that add up to big change and big consequences. Yes, we do need to talk about just the metaphysical concepts themselves, just the idea of space and think about that for a while, and the idea of source and think about that for a while. But again, if it doesn't change how we're living now, why does it matter? Because we can't prove that there's something else after this life. We can't prove that any of it is actually true. We just have faith. And does faith mean anything if you live this life like it means nothing? Any good, philosophical, spiritual, religious, informed worldview should make you a better person, should call you to be a better person. And that must include advocating for those whose space has been taken away, who is continually being encroached upon, who when they fight and advocate to get their space back are being told that they're being unreasonable. We have to talk about these things. And not only am I frustrated at the people who only seem to talk about the ephemeral metaphysical things, it's also really frustrating to see people that only talk about the way that this impacts this life. Because it makes it easier to write it off, right? And it shouldn't be, because it deeply impacts the biggest questions in our lives. The way we live, the way we take up space, the way we advocate for people does impact our spiritual, source-filled, non-material, esoteric world too. It is easier for a camel to go through an eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. Treat others the way that you want to be treated. It is in my nature. The one who has no enemies has never stood for anything. He who is without sin, throw the first stone. The emperor has no clothes. These fables, these trite sayings, these verses, these stories that carry power because they make indictments about how we are called to live now, here and now, not in the afterlife. And they must be connected. So we must talk about both. Rant about the importance of justice work over. Just in this video. It may continue in other forms because it is important. The sixth and final pillar of coherence, purpose, manifests as creativity. And this one is, how can you have a favorite pillar? It's like having a favorite child, but this one's pretty near and dear to my heart. Largely because why am I getting emotional? Because it matters to me, that's why. This that you're seeing, this video, what is the Cohere Collective, the Coherence Matrix, and all of the content on this channel or wherever you're seeing this video, fits nicely sometimes and unnicely other times into this pillar for me in my life. It is my purpose. And all of these videos that you see, me standing here talking to you about these things, is creative. This is me stepping into something generative that feels artful, and is me trying to do my best to create a space for us to ask these questions in a real and important way. Purpose invites creation, because when you feel called to something, when there is something that you are meant to do, it's something that you are meant to do. Right? There is something entailed from that. And so if there's something entailed from it, you must create. And yes, creation always invites destruction, deconstruction, tower moments, if you will. But that's the beauty of it. Purpose, as we've talked about, is a way of moving forwards. It's a way of understanding the experiences we have so that we may better live in alignment with our coherence, live coherently. Purpose is true north on a compass, and it's kind of like when you're lost in the woods and you're kind of spinning around in circles and you're trying to find true north, and you move really fast past it and you like feel that ping for a second and you're like, oh, it was there. And you start walking, but then it's like, wait, I thought it was there. But maybe it's actually more kind of this way, and you kind of shift a little bit and then you're going towards it and you're trying to get back to true north, right? That's purpose. It's not something you're going to find once you make it out of the woods. It's the thing that allows you to carve your unique path through it. And that unique path is so creative. You may have to climb a tree. You may have to chop one down and replant if you do. You may have to sit and rest and take a nap while your compass figures its shit out because it's way too confused right now. You're gonna have to stop and get a bite to eat at some point. What does that have to do with purpose? Oh, it's the creativity. It's the creativity of it, that your journey is going to look specific to you. And you get to design that path as you go. And even the potholes that you hit and the booby traps that you fall into in your journey through the woods, it's yours. And you create it as you take that step forward. So that's the manifestation piece of Cohere, and why it's so important that these esoteric concepts be embodied in real time in this reality. That's coherence. That's why this is called coherence, is because it is truly making sense of the way that we make sense, making meaning out of the way that we make meaning. It has to not only make sense up here, has to make sense down here. And oftentimes we're doing something like this, right? Going back and forth. It is an evolution. You don't strike the perfect path of coherence. But again, it's the creative process of carving as you go. So the meaning crisis. Is it real? Yes. We all desperately and deeply want to feel and find meaning. It is more pressing now than ever, and I think that that is an insight that is so well taken by so many people because we feel it. We feel it. And yet we are still not met with a good road forward. The solutions we're offered are either a strict religion that doesn't allow room for curiosity or something that only pokes holes and doesn't allow you to build anything up. And you deserve better than that. You deserve something that honors your unique worldview and your unique humanity while still calling you to be a good person, to live in community and do works of charity and connect and all of the things, right? Like religion works for a reason, because when anyone in the congregation is pregnant and giving birth, there is automatically people signing up to create meals to put in the freezer. Anytime someone falls ill, there are shifts of people going to visit them in the hospital. Anytime there's a local tragedy, all of the needy people go to the local church. Most shelters start as a part of a religious group. Those are the beautiful things of religion, this community, this support. But it doesn't have to be grounded in fixed dogma. And then we see poking holes. We see only attacking the ways in which the faith is flawed without holding space for the beauty of the community and the good things that arise. And even for those that do hold the middle ground, that are, what do they call them? Social Christians is like a new thing, which even as a non-Christian, I kind of find offensive, which I don't have a right to find offensive, but growing up in Texas, you can't be a social Christian, honey. Even though most people are, you still better believe in Jesus Christ. It's a whole other thing. But point being, even those that are social Christians are still deeply denying this one element of awe, of wonder, that is so fundamental to the human experience. And it's saying, well, as long as you're doing good works, you're good. And in some sense, yeah, if you're not hurting someone, like, I'm not going to point fingers, right? As long as you're not encroaching on someone else's space, don't hurt someone. You're allowed your freedom. But I do think that that is a failure of seeing the beauty in humanity, of seeing all of the ways that every single human being is magical, even if you don't believe in magic, right? It's like DNA is one of the most fucking magical things I've ever heard of in my life. Just today I was having a conversation with a friend about sublimation, because I remembered the first time I learned about it in my high school physics class, that something could literally go from a gas back to a solid or a solid to a gas without having to pass through water. And you're going to tell me magic doesn't exist. I don't care if we have a scientific explanation for it. That doesn't mean it's not magic. Arthur C. Clarke, he says any sufficient science will be indistinguishable from magic. And you want to tell me we need to take the awe out of these things? Give me a formula. I don't care. I'm still going to find the beauty in it. Because it's fucking beautiful. Because it's so beautiful, and so are you, and you are a miracle just by existing. Your mom and your dad had an intimate moment together, and then you grew. Mary didn't need to be a virgin for that birth to be a miracle, because every single birth is such a fucking miracle. This physical reality is insane. And stunning. And awesome in that it leaves me stunned and in awe. It is incredible in that it feels non-credible. So hold both. Walk the middling way. Take what works from this matrix and leave the rest, but know that you and your life is a miracle. And it is our collective duty to live out miraculously. That is our duty. To be the miracle that we were invited to be. Even if we were the ones who invited ourselves to be that miracle. I don't care where you think that invitation came from. Start owning the fact that you are a fucking miracle. And that each other are miracles too. And that we get to be miracles together. Oh, it's so cool. Y'all, it's so cool that we're little miracles walking around, and that I want to get a little cocktail and go dance with my friends, and that I can also make a little lunch and go to a job and put on a little outfit and accept money from someone for something. Like, it's beautiful and it's terrifying, and it is the biggest, most important question, but also the most basic and simple. It's you. I don't know what that call looks like to you, but answer it. Bring, hello, it's your calling. It's ready for you to pick up. Thank you for being here and for being here. And as always, I hope you feel like you are living more coherently. Until next time, love. There's a meaning crisis. There's a meaning crisis. Everyone's searching for a meaning. Yeah, we know, okay? Now what? Have you heard about the meaning crisis? There's a meaning crisis. All of us are really looking for meaning. Young people don't have meaning anymore. It's the problem of the church. It's the problem of the scientists. It's the problem of the women. Okay, there's a meaning crisis. There's a meaning crisis. All of these things. No one has meaning anymore. Okay, yeah. There's a meaning crisis. There's a meaning crisis. No one has meaning anymore. Now what?